Okay, well, we're at the top of the hour, and I can only imagine a number of people will be logging in over the next couple minutes, as we've had hundreds of people sign up for this this exciting event. Welcome to the MachineMetrics webinar series. This is our third installment of our live reports on the impact of COVID-19 on global manufacturing. I'm your host today, Graham Immerman. In this third panel, we're really shifting our focus to the global stage. Obviously, the COVID has had a tremendous impact on all of us personally and on the business side. We've been fortunate enough to bring together some amazing people to share and provide insight and value in this time where many of us are looking for information. And we're fortunate to have Francisco Betti, who is the head of manufacturing and production for the World Economic Forum, who has offered to lead this discussion. Between industry leaders, we have Stefan Setner, who's a partner and associate director of Boston Consulting Group, Mathieu Dassamville, who's a consultancy solutions manager for SECO Tools, and our own Bill Byther, co-founder and CEO of MachineMetrics. A real quick agenda. We're going to do a brief introduction that will be led by Francisco and get right to the live discussion. We also will have a Q&A portion of this, and as part of that, a couple housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar will be recorded. So for those of you who are looking to get a recording, fear not, you will get that in your email as soon as we can. We'll send out a link to that right after the webinar or shortly after. We do encourage questions. They're very welcome. So within the Zoom navigation, there is a Q&A portal, and you can ask us questions at any time. We'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. But if we don't get back to you right away, hang tight, and we'll do our best as we shift through them. A couple other housekeeping items on our side. MachineMetrics has recently launched a COVID-19 response program. Like many other companies in the industry, we've really shifted our focus to supporting companies in need at this time. So we are delivering our platform and consulting services for free to any manufacturer who is either in the production of ventilators, ventilator components, or any other COVID treatment to help companies, provide them with applications to enable social distancing and remote access to data, so they can get these life-saving devices to people who need them. As we move forward in our webinar series, we have a couple up-and-coming events that I do hope you all decide to attend. Next week, we'll be hosting a webinar with the Digital Manufacturing Institute, MXD, on democratizing manufacturing data. That'll be next week from 1 to 2 p.m. EST. The following week will be our fourth State of Manufacturing, where we'll shift our focus to the machine tool industry. That'll be May 12th from 1 to 2 p.m. and we'll be hosting Steve Klein of Gardner Intelligence and leaders from SourceDay, who have really interesting data to talk to us about on other components of the business of the manufacturing industry. Lastly, later this month, we'll be hosting a webinar on equipment as a service for machine tool builders with our friends at Accenture on May 26th. And we hope you join us for that as well. But for now, enough about us. Let's shift our focus to these amazing people who've been generous enough to join us today. Thank you, Fran. Take it away.
Brilliant, Graham, and a very good morning or afternoon to all of you. It's amazing to see that we already have over 60 people connected, and I'm delighted to be joining you all from Geneva today. What we will be focusing on with our colleagues and panelists, it's really on the impact of COVID-19 on manufacturing and supply systems, and the role that advanced manufacturing technology and data can play to help unlock value, both to navigate the crisis, but also to help us adapt to what is likely going to be a new normal, which we all know is going to be different to the one we have seen until a couple of months ago. Maybe to set the stage, let me share a few concepts or thoughts. The first one is that when we look at the manufacturing globally and supply and value chains, they have been under stress for many years already. When you look at the combination of trade wars and the geopolitical instability that we see all around the world, when you see what the fourth industrial revolution is doing and how it's bringing new technologies, driving transformation at speed, and you add to that maybe the pressure that is coming from the environment, climate change, and so on, someone could see already a quite complicated situation that was really stressing supply and value chains at the global level. Now, what COVID-19 has created is a sort of a perfect storm, which is radically accelerating some of the transformations that we have seen developing over the past couple of years. Just as an example, we were on the phone with a select group of CEOs last week, and some were telling us that some of the developments that they had forecasted for the next 10 years and are now materializing and happening in just a couple of weeks. So they believe is that the level of disruptions and changes that we're going to see in manufacturing and supply system in light of the current crisis is going to be likely massive. And maybe let me share two key data points, which I found very interesting. We just completed a survey with over 350 chief operating supply chain officers. Two were the main points that came out that struck me. The first one is that 82% of them acknowledged that their supply chains were radically disrupted, and that for the very first time they were seeing that disruptions coming both from the demand and the supply side. So the level of disruptions and the type of disruption that we are seeing, it's really unprecedented. Now, the positive note is that 70% of them mentioned that they were seeing in advanced manufacturing the role of data part of the solution, and were thinking about increasing their investments in those technologies and in that space going forward. So I suggest that with that, we move into the first round of questions. And to break the ice, what I'd like to ask to all our three panelists, it's a very simple question, which is the following. In your view, and please keep your answers short, we'll have time to discuss further later on, but in your view, what is the #1 disruption that COVID-19 have brought in the space of manufacturing and supply chains? And what is the role that advanced manufacturing and data in particular can play to unlock new value? And Bill, you are hosting us today virtually, which is a pleasure. So why don't we start with you first? Over to you.
Great, thank you, Francisco. So what we've really seen, we're in a unique position where we have access to a lot of customers' manufacturing data that we can aggregate, and that's given us insight into the supply chain, and also we provide this aggregated data to our customers. And what we found is that we've already, like, what resonates with me is Francisco, you already mentioned that there's a trend to domesticate the supply chain and to bring some of the products that are being manufactured in-house. And we see our customers leveraging benchmark data that we're providing to let them know, how they're performing compared to others in the industry. And since COVID happened, we've seen an acceleration of that. So we've seen our customers that have been reining in their supply chain, just because one, not just globally, currently, if you're ordering products from China, that's becoming an issue, but also domestically, right? So really being able to be more vertically integrated as a manufacturer. So this is a trend that we're seeing. I would say it's the #1. We're also seeing a couple that I'll quickly mention is our customers that are changing over to actually work on like ventilator parts and other components that are relevant for COVID. And the other really is to sort of double down on using data to improve efficiency on the factory floor. But those are really is what we're seeing, in real time, just from what we see from our customers.
Brilliant, excellent, and hold on that one, because we'll certainly go back to what you are hearing from the data coming from all the machines that you monitor globally. That's absolutely fascinating. Stefan, I mean, you are in direct contact with supply chain officers from some of the world largest and leading manufacturing companies in the world. What is the #1 disruption that you have seen, and how can advanced manufacturing and data help?
Yeah. So I think all the executives are proud that they are developing their supply chains and their advanced manufacturing over years now, with lots of investments into digital advancements. And now they might have expected that even in a major crisis like COVID, the investments sort of pay off, and that they are much better equipped to counteract such a crisis. Huh? I would say the major disruption, or I could probably also call it disappointment, is that they might, or many of them, might not have reached this goal already. Huh? So now they are seeing that this massive disruption, and it cannot be more massive, huh? So maybe also not surprisingly, puts the whole system at stress. And they need to have many manual interactions where they might have thought that they don't need manual interactions anymore. Huh? So, or put it in simple words, they are not as far as they thought they are with respect to digital investments. Huh? And that might be a disappointment, but I think it's also the task at hand for the future to keep upgrading the data infrastructure and then the digital supply chain systems in order to be responsive for the next volatile times.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Stefan. And we will certainly push you a bit further on that one later on. Matthew, from SECO, what is your perspective, both on what you are seeing for your own company, but also from some of the clients that you are serving?
Sorry, what we are seeing from our customer is that the challenges now are not only the traditional one, cost, quality, or delivery time. The sustainability, it's coming more and more, and it could be the environmental challenges before the COVID, but now we can see that the safety of the workers are also a main issue for the companies, and it will push and accelerate for sure the way that the company are looking at the safety and sustainability overall. And together with environmental challenges that we have in front of us, all this together is just accelerating the challenges in front of them. The second thing is that when it comes to digitalization, I'm joining Stefan's view as well. We can see under this pressurized time that the ones that have already invested in the digitalization or are already on the journey of Industry 4.0 are much better prepared to face closing of factory or less people inside the workshop thanks to automation, or the management of the factories that wants to monitor his factory from home. These companies are much more prepared, and the ones that have been late are struggling a lot now to keep the speed and to go back to speed, so to say.
Excellent. So looks like we are moving into a scenario in which companies will likely move away from cost competitiveness into product risk and digital competitiveness. That's very interesting. Maybe with that, let me go back to you, Bill. And again, I think that people are looking to hear more about, what are the secrets that you are pulling from all those machines that you are monitoring? And the question is, can you tell us a bit more and share some examples of what is the data telling you? What do you see from across the globe?
Yeah, so thanks, Francisco. So first I'll start with just a quick explanation of what we do so you can understand where this data is coming from. So MachineMetrics is an industrial IoT platform that's built specially for machines and manufacturing. And we've made it really easy to collect and contextualize data from your manufacturing equipment, and then use that data to improve visibility, but also to predict and act on problems on the factory floor. We engage the factory workers, but we help them be more efficient with this data. And we've connected to thousands of machines. I'm actually going to share my screen here to give you just a bit more context into that data here. We connected to thousands of machines globally. A lot heavy concentration in North America, and we're based in Massachusetts in the United States, and you'll see here just an example of where our customers are, just to give you an idea of where the data is coming from. And this provides a lot of context into the industry as a whole and how the industry is performing, and that's what I'll be able to share here. So the first thing I wanted to display here is looking at machine utilization. We look at machine utilization as a very general purpose tool to identify performance that is the same across all of our organizations. Basically, it identifies when the machine is operating versus when it's not. And it's the simplest data point to extract from a machine. And what we see here is we can see the trend from 2018, which is red, 2019, which is green, and then 2020. And coming into March in 2020, we're pretty pleased to see an increase back to the level, getting back to the levels of 2018 in terms of manufacturing. And then you can see that we actually saw about a 10% increase. I'm going to go ahead and go to a little bit more detail here. So this is what the first part of 2020 looked like, and a nice increase that correlated with some of the data that we saw, from other sources, and then the COVID pandemic hit around March, and for the first couple of weeks, we were pretty excited to see that there wasn't a huge impact in manufacturing. That the days after the shutdowns occurred in at least in the United States, and then I guess that it was inevitable, but we ended up seeing the fall that occurred really during that pandemic. There was about a week or two lag from the actual shutdowns. I guess it was about a 1 week lag, and so here we saw a decline of about close to 16%. You'll see that we saw a decline, and then we hit the Easter holiday, which if I go back to the trends that we see, every holiday there's a dip, right? Because often the plants are shut down during that period of time. But if we go back to where we are now, after the Easter holiday, it looks like that we've flattened. And so that really demonstrates that we're kind of at least for the last week and a half, almost 2 weeks, we're seeing that we're not seeing this radical change. I hope that this continues for a while and we won't go any lower, but it does indicate that we saw that initial impact from COVID, and we might be sort of settling in at about a 16% decline from where we were before. And then just a couple other points of view. So this is reflecting our customer base, which isn't necessarily manufacturing as a whole. We do have a lot of industries that are represented here, but heavy concentration of medical device, industrial machinery, a lot of contract manufacturers that are usually smaller manufacturers, and then a smaller slice of pure automotive and pure aerospace and defense companies. And what you'll see here is, if you look at this by industry, where we saw the first impact in a decline in automotive. That's the yellow chart, the orange chart here, and then right as the OEMs closed down in Detroit, we saw an immediate drop in automotive because that supply chain is so tight, right? So you can see that impact right away. And then you could see an increase. We think it's because some of our customers actually changed their operations to actually make ventilator parts. There's one particular example that actually got permission to talk about, which is a customer of ours in Mexico. They provide brake components to the large automotive companies. Company called Rossini. They were actually a panelist, one of our first panelists. They completely changed, they stopped their production, and they're making actual ventilators, soup to nuts. They're making the whole thing for Mexico. I find that really exciting, impressive, and been kind of following their progress. But that effectively has increased the automotive's performance, but not really making automotive parts. Some other things to point out, like medical device has stayed pretty flat. We see some medical device components that are elective procedures that have dropped, and others that have increased. But there's only so much capacity that's available, and we see other companies like our contract manufacturers that are also making medical parts now that weren't before. So that's just a quick review of our data and some of the insights that we're able to leverage from that. But I'm happy to circle back to this if there's other questions from the panelists or the audience.
This is fascinating, Bill, and you know the machines don't lie, which is why I'm fascinated by the data you are collecting. Any just to push a bit further on that one, could you be able to tell us maybe, because the pandemic is a bit word, but if you break that down, what were the 2 or 3 main reasons behind the drop, and then what could be needed to go back to the levels in which we were before the crisis or slightly closer?
Yeah, I mean, the main reason was really the supply chain, right? I mean, the example of automotive was, the demand stopped so that the work stopped. But what we see in other cases is that the stay-at-home orders and the shutdowns had some impact, but not as significant in manufacturing as it has in other industries, right? So, some of them just shut down for a week to clean their facility, and then they're back up and running in 1 or 2 weeks. And I think that's part of why we haven't seen a sharper decline. Most of our customers are still operating, but there's some that are more impacted by the just the general economics, and really, like, we have like a boat manufacturer, like a recreational boat manufacturer, and they're unlikely to sell many boats this year, just because of the economy. So they're going to have a bigger impact than medical device manufacturers. So we see that in in our data, and different customers that are responding differently based on their industry and who they serve.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that, Bill. And maybe Stefan, let me go back to you. And also because we spent the last year working together, the World Economic Forum with BCG, doing some research specifically on how to unlock the value of data in manufacturing, mainly through cross-company collaboration. And the question is, how do you see that value unfolding concretely in the new normal, in the new context that COVID-19 has created?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe before going to the sad story of COVID, I think the good thing and the collaborative thing, there's one general rule, which means if the more partners in the ecosystem are contributing to data sharing, the more value is unlocked overall. So let's not sort of separate out us and try to survive on our own. There's a golden rule: data sharing unlocks value. What I think is the interesting next step is that the data use has, of course, very many different facets. So in my eyes, there are 2 sort of archetypes of data use. The first one is more inside the walls of a manufacturing plant, for example. So then, I mean, the training of AI algorithms to become better in predictive maintenance, or to improve process parameters in machines, that can all be enhanced by data sharing also with other companies, because as we all know, AI algorithms needs lots of data, and then the quality of the algorithm becomes better the more data we put into it. But that is inside the walls. I think the second facet, which we have heard now of quite a lot, is then the end-to-end value chain and how we connect on the transactional basis, so which means really on a day-to-day basis. I think one good example is the track and trace. Where is my material in the end-to-end value chain? Can I track it upstream to tier 2 suppliers? Can I track it downstream into my distribution channels? So keeping control, ideally in real time, what is happening in my supply chain is an end-to-end application. Or another application is provenance tracking. So more the transactional control on the supply chain. So those, I think it's really fascinating that so many application areas of shared data exist. But now coming to COVID, as I also said in my first answer, I think it's a bit, and maybe disappointing is a too harsh word, but it's at least interesting to see what now in reality of a big shock happens to those data and to those applications. And let me maybe deliberately take a different industry because it's so close to our heart. Because we talk to our grocery retail clients quite a lot in the COVID crisis. And then one of the discussions was, do we have to shut down the auto replenishment algorithms for the grocery stores? So, and that is close to our heart because we are all shopping and we all are starving for toilet paper and these stuffs which is not on the shelves. Huh? And now, why is that interesting? Because some of those grocery retailers are really employing very state-of-the-art data-driven approaches, AI, store-based forecasting to steer the auto replenishment to have the right stuff on shelf. Now the question was, can we continue to run those advanced technologies in the COVID crisis? And the answer was no, unfortunately not, because the algorithms were driving crazy and the proposed replenishment quantities were wrong, totally wrong in many categories. So therefore, they had to turn it off and go back to manual replenishment and walk through the stores and see what replenishment quantities they need to order upstream at their DC. And that, I think, is a good example. And I'm very sure there are machinery examples as well, but I think this one is a tangible to say there are, of course, still limitations, and we will not overcome every single limitation, but we need to continue to working on data-driven approaches and make them more and more sophisticated over time, which is not trivial, but I think that keeps us busy in the future, which is good, huh? Because we have lots to do still in the data ecosystem.
Excellent, Stefan. I think that the example that you just provided, it's making clear that the disruptions are not just at the operating system model or on the operations side, but also at the business model or value delivery model. And I think that that's a great, which is one of the things that data is enabling. And that's a great segue into the question I wanted to ask you, Mathieu, which is, do you see COVID-19 accelerating the transformation or the deployment of new data-driven business models?
Of course, it has been some tendency that will be just accelerating at the moment. I mean, we have seen some new business model coming even before the crisis. And I will try to use a tangible example for that we can see in our industry, machining industry. And for example, in the SECO, we are selling some vending cabinet for storing and supplying cutting tools to the operator on the shop floor level. And this type of cabinet are generating a lot of data. And now this cabinet are remotely followed from home by the operator, by the planning guy to replenish automatically new tools, or by the purchasing guy in order to know the consumption or to follow up the deviation of consumption and stuff like this. So all this data has been there for a couple of months or years in some industries, but it was not really used. And the fact to be outside of the factory or to do things remotely are a little bit forcing people to go more in details to this data to really understand what's happened, because physically you can open the shelves and look at yourself and you feel, are we going to replenish or not? Now you are forced to go inside this data and to make your own feeling out of it and to decide what to do. So this is accelerating the movement. People are forced to go more in their data, and when they are monitoring their factory from their bed, they need to try to understand a little bit more what's happened there. So really we can see an acceleration here. And of course, from the SECO perspective or people providing services, we have to find a new business model. And we have, of course, everything which is linked to online training or online support. You need to find new ways of, instead of having a physical classroom, how do you invoice your customer for the trainings that you will put online, or for the videos that you will do, or for the whatever you will do online. You need to find a way to sell it to your end customer, and that needs to from some people to just create it under the pressure of the crisis. And some other business models that we can see in our industry is what we call, for instance, cost per part or per use, where usually, and I have an example of for instance, in an engine case machining, where you are drilling holes. Instead of buying drills, you buy holes. So as soon as you have a good hole produced, you pay for the the tool supplier. So that type of stuff is also accelerating. We can see more and more customer demand around this type of business model. We want to pay for the good parts. We don't want to pay for the bad one. And it's also risky. We have an example here in France, where in Europe, where we have a Safran and Rolls-Royce providing aircraft engine. Their model for a couple of years now were to sell the engine for quite low margin, and then to sell the services. And the services was based on the number of engine hours. And now we have thousands of aircraft stuck on the ground with not flying at all, and all this revenue is disappearing for these guys, because they were just based their model on the pay-per-use. So every business model are being challenged during that time, for sure. And some will survive, some will accelerate, some will be maybe just adjusting. That would be very interesting to look at.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Matthew. And we will go back to the concept of connected value chains and new business models. I think that's one of the most interesting aspects of this conversation. Maybe Bill, going back to you. Clearly, we saw a lot of new practices emerging, or Matthew was saying, that he's seen companies leveraging data in new ways. How do you think that manufacturers going forward are going to be approaching their operations, and which of these new practices or use cases are likely going to stay and become, the new innovations? I was in a conversation recently in which someone was comparing the current pandemic and crisis to the Second World War, which sparked a tremendous amount of innovation, some of which are still used in manufacturing.
Yeah, I don't think that this is that dissimilar, to be honest. There's been a slow push in manufacturing to automate. It looks slow now just because it's taken a long time just to get to where we are now. And most manufacturers still really don't leverage data in a way that that really improves automation. That's one of the tenets of why MachineMetrics started, was to really leverage data on the factory floor in better ways. So those companies that have already done that are more competitive right now. They're able to send half their workforce home and still operate, right? Remote machine monitoring, helps supervisors and managers manage from home, right? So all these things really weren't as important before, and it changes, how our customers go about their business day to day. I guess there's less of a negativity around improving, having less people on the factory floor, because those companies that haven't adopted these technologies are struggling, and we see that in our customer base. There's certain customers that that don't leverage the data as much, and you can see the difference between them, and some of them, a few of them, unfortunately, are going out of business. Versus those customers of ours that are leveraging that data and are taking this opportunity now to go even deeper, right? We see an increase in usage amongst our best customers, there's quite a few that are doing this, and we're busier than ever just responding to their requests and diving deeper into how can we leverage that data to even an example of predicting tool failure, something that we made some amazing progress on, for CNC cutting tools. But another example is that we work with the machine builders themselves and distributors, and those that have adopted IoT technologies to be able to offer remote service are very glad that they had done that. It's hard for newer companies to very quickly distribute something like IoT to their fleet of machines. It takes time, right? So those companies that have made those investments prior are really benefiting from it now. And so now our customers that are still able to provide service to their customers through remote access to this data. So those are just a couple of examples. I could probably there's other very specific use cases, but just as a general sense, using that data to improve automation, predictability, and efficiency on the factory floor is really what we're seeing a doubling down on.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Bill. And maybe going back to Stefan, and you know, the three of you mentioned that companies are clearly not making the most of their data right now. And maybe building on what Bill just mentioned, what are the must-do for companies if they really want to take advantage of that data? What are the actions they should take? And not just by looking at the data, but, you know, taking into account also the broader enablers that they may need to unlock or activate.
Yeah, and you might have sensed I like to take the supply chain or supply ecosystem view rather than inside the walls. Both is important, but let me maybe expand on this one. And I think it's a nice opportunity now to revisit some of the buzzwords in, let's say, digital supply chain management that have been around for years and years, and now start to taking them serious. And I think three of those buzzwords which really become or are relevant and become even more relevant are, first of all, the good old control tower. So I think everybody has talked about control tower. Still, maybe not everybody has the same understanding what it means. How I would interpret it is a solution and a capability to steer the supply chains in the very short term. So transactional steering, where is my truck? Why is my material not here? How can I react in the very short term to balance my supply chain and to keep the KPIs in sync? So that's the very short term. The second buzzword, we have all heard it, is a digital twin. But now if we put it into the context of the supply chain for the planning horizon of 1 week to 12 weeks out. So if we want to prepare for what is coming in the next roughly 3 months, a digital twin is a great tool to play through, let's say, short-term scenarios to anticipate what can we still change in this planning horizon until 12 weeks. I mean, we cannot buy a new machine, but at least we can change shift patterns, or we can change some allocations of orders. And so, but that cannot be done on a piece of paper. It cannot be done with most of the traditional ERP systems. So this digital twin concept, I think, becomes quite relevant and is fully data-driven, obviously. Huh? And then the third one for the planning horizon beyond 3 months, sometimes it's called the SNOP or the IBP timeframe until 18 months out. Then the AI-driven, or it must not be AI, it can also be advanced analytics, but the scenario play comes into play. I talk to so many clients who even struggle to define what is a scenario, because they are living in such a complex world, and then there are demand scenarios, there are supply scenarios, there are allocation scenarios, and so on. And bringing this all together and being capable, data-driven, to generate scenarios, to evaluate them, and then to decide upon it in a management team. That is a bottleneck, not only in COVID, and that is a purely data-driven topic, which then needs to be elevated to a management discussion, obviously, to take wise decisions in the midterm planning horizon. And now those three capabilities, I think now are much more relevant than they seem to have been in the past. I'm not saying they have not been relevant, but I think they haven't had the attention that they needed. But latest now, I think everybody understands that those are capabilities to be developed in the future. And the good thing, and maybe that's the last statement, it doesn't take ages anymore. So for example, in BCG, we have built a COVID simulation tool for our machinery clients, where we put COVID disease status of global countries in context with category views of supply materials, in context with supplier databases. So intelligently combining many data sources and then providing a simulation tool. What should I do in my short-term supply chain reconfiguration? If I'm sourcing from a country that is in shutdown now, what are my options? So the agile mindset of building these kinds of data-driven tools is so helpful in order to be fast, also to build tools. It's not about a 5-year waterfall implementation journey anymore. It's an agile approach to build solutions that really help all data-driven. And that's fascinating, I think, in this situation.
Thank you, Stefan. And maybe a follow-on question on that, because we heard in the last couple of weeks many companies talking about nearshoring, reshoring, shortening their supply chains. And one of the comments I recently heard is that, you know, before you are able to shorten your supply chain, you need to put the right digital infrastructure in place, right? That's probably step number one, and not to start moving assets from one place to the other. Could you agree with that statement?
So generally, I think for me, it's a bit, let's say, too simplistic reflex to say, now I have a problem in the crisis because my supply chains are long. Now, let's take the simple answer and shorten them by putting everything around my plant, and then every problem is solved. And that I think is a bit too simplistic. I think we need a much more de-averaged approach to risk management, to even managing longer supply chains. I mean, if you become more sophisticated on the demand forecasting side, then you can also afford to have slightly longer supply chain upstream, because you are still better in managing the demand supply synchronization. And so I think for me, it would be a little bit too simplistic. But then generally, to your question, obviously, yes, it's also not easy to manage the supply chain simply because the supplier is 100 kilometers away, because in digital times, you would not jump into your car, drive to the supplier and to take oral interactions. It will still be a digital connection between the two. And whether the supplier is 100 kilometers away or 5,000 doesn't in principle make a big difference. Only the transport time obviously is a difference. But I wouldn't like to be too simplistic in reshoring everything and becoming 100% local.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Stefan. And maybe Matthew, going back to you, it'd be interesting if you could take a different perspective. I mean, one of the things that we observed during this crisis is that consumers are changing their behaviors, right? And that will inevitably force manufacturers to take new approaches. Can you comment on that and maybe tell us, what you are seeing from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, we can see the different trends happening. Of course, what we can see is that big groups or big companies that have different units in the world or production unit around the world, we are looking again to their global footprint to see where are my factories. And under the pressure of COVID crisis at the moment, we can see that you have to close some factories in some country, you have to balance your production to another factory in a couple of days or weeks. And these big companies can test live how good they are when it comes to standardization, ways of working, IT systems, compatibility. And even us inside SECO, we have many production units, and we have been struggling also to move production around very fast. And it just highlights where you are not as good as you expected, so to say, and where you need to improve a lot. And of course, all the data and IT systems is a base for being flexible in such a world. But for sure, companies are also relooking at what is a strategy for the future. And we can see in Europe a relocation process that basically some parts will be relocated closer to where they are aiming to. And this is basically, and of course, short-term doing stuff internally instead of using your supply chain for doing that. It's a tendency. It's also a risky one, because if you kill your supply chain during that time, they will never be there for you when you restart. So it's always a question of balance there. What we can see also to our customer, as we are providing product and services to machining companies, of course, we have a social distancing and no visitor policy in many places at the moment. So it's not possible at all to meet customers physically. And so the traditional face-to-face discussion is just stopped in once. And we have to find other ways. And of course, it's a lot of online, Teams, Zoom, whatever, Skype, that you are building with the customers at the moment. Also providing more and more information to the customer, what we call the level 0 support. So you just put on your website or on a place information that the customer can find himself, so without needing you. And we are also experiencing at the moment remote maintenance support. So with Google Glass, you will do the maintenance with an expert from the other part of the world. So it will be faster and cheaper to restart your machine, because you have the German machine manufacturer, which will support you when you are in India. And this is happening more and more. And when it comes to maintenance, I guess maybe Bill, you will confirm that. But when we have lockdown of many weeks, I mean, at least in Europe, a lot of companies have closed 2, 3, 4 weeks. It will be a big backlog of maintenance, and all these people will have to restart all their machine at the same time, almost. And you have to, maintenance will be for sure an issue. So if they can save efficiency by having a remote support, for sure, this will be accelerating trends to have an online support. And of course, as a SECO, we are a tool supplier. We have a small example, but very, very nice to see creativity from our people. I mean, we have been, for instance, some customers shipping us used inserts and used carbide tools to our technician at home. So the guy who has been receiving thousands of inserts, he has done an analysis of thousands of inserts, and was sharing the result with a customer over a Skype meeting. So this stuff will never have been even imaginable 2 months ago. And that's new stuff that are created by the people. And I'm quite sure some will stay because the social distancing, for sure, we see also that it will be a trend, and it will be tomorrow. We are already discussing about the open space layout or stuff like this in the office areas. For sure, something will stay in the future. So new model will have to be adjusted, so to say.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Matthew, for that. Maybe one final question to the three of you, and then we'll move to some of the questions that the audience has shared with us. The question is, how important the role of collaboration is across companies to really unlock the value of data and enable of these solutions. I mean, Stefan, you were talking about the importance of the ecosystem before. Anything you want to reinforce on that front?
Yes, maybe there's one underestimated aspect of data sharing. So I think we could all easily agree conceptually it's there is much more value if we share data. But then the business reality is that this is effort for everybody. And then there's also trust that needs to be involved in order to share data. And it's the what's in it for me type of question. There are dependencies between from suppliers to their customers. And so I would even argue that the business process around data sharing is probably the bigger bottleneck than the data sharing in itself. And I think technology-wise, it's maybe the easier or the easiest thing to share data. And that is the fascinating facet of it. Although we are all, I think, conceptually willing to share data to make it really happen and to get all the sort of the accompanying processes in place to actually do it, that's sometimes a little bit of a bottleneck. So therefore, I think the work that we are all doing to prove the value behind what happens if we share data is the critical enabler to accelerate the business discussion around should we do it, what's in it for us, what's the gain share mechanism that we employ. So having the proof of concept in terms of value, I think, is the critical enabler to make it happen.
Great, thank you, Stefan. And Bill, maybe the question to you, what happens when you're able to source data from multiple companies along one same supply chain? What do you see?
Yeah, so first we ask our customers whether they're comfortable sharing the data. It's something that they can opt out of, so that some customers are more open to it than others. But the value that we gain is that we gain a deeper understanding of different types of equipment, what some common problems are, and we're able to really have a better understanding, as an organization, how to help our customers improve operation of their operations of their equipment. And then there's that's just one aspect of data that's really around, in our case, around the machine. But as Stefan was saying, as you're able to pull other data sources in, you can understand, you can go a lot deeper into the supply chain, into, and that's, I think there's a ton of value there that really hasn't been surfaced very much. We're just one piece of that whole, the whole picture of data and manufacturing. And, I mean, your question is about like what things, how do you do it? How do customers benefit? The primary benefit that our customers receive, every day is the benchmarking information that the customers can look at and rate their performance compared to others. The other sort of inherent benefit is just the knowledge that's gained by having similar equipment, and knowing where the, what the biggest failures are, for example. Individually, you wouldn't really know, but collectively, that's information that can be gathered.
Excellent. No, that's very helpful. Thank you, Bill. And Matthew, to close with you on this very first round of questions, anything you would like to add? Any perspectives on the importance of collaborations and the role of the ecosystem?
No, I mean, under pressure, under crisis, I think we can see also, as we are all, or I mean, a lot of companies feeling they are going through the same storm. We are seeing a relationship and trust between companies that are tested in a way. And when the relationship and the trust between companies were already there, you can see a very good example of people helping each other under this pressurized time. And also seeing that, yeah, we are in the same storm for sure, in the same boat, not always, but everybody has to face the same crisis, so to say. And we have seen closeness between company, or closer relationship improving and increasing for helping each other. So of course it will not last forever, but we can see that the human being inside this crisis is playing a crucial role to keep company alive as well. So this is also this plus the digitalization journey that has been started and accelerated. For me, it's one of the main takeout of this, what we will see after this crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make sure we have enough time to cover the questions that came from the audience, and I will ask you to volunteer to respond. The very first one, it's on AI. We talk a lot about of data, but none of you comment on the role that AI can play. Do you see AI as part of the solution as companies try to build more resilience, supply chains in the post-crisis scenario, and how? What is the role that it can play?
So I guess you're asking me for that. Yeah, I mean, AI is, I mean, the hardest part really is getting the data in a format that is, that you can actually leverage for AI and to really just, discover patterns. So many applications are stuck there, right? So we found that, as we're able to gather the data, there's many use cases that we can apply AI to. Sometimes they're very specialized. So, customers themselves are able to leverage the data and develop their own UI for their unique, applications. There's some that we found that, given the data, like I said before, it's across similar types of equipment and similar types of operations that we're actually able to provide to customers. But then there's even a higher level AI that requires collaboration across the supply chain, and we're not there yet. So I think that there's an opportunity through this sharing of data that is kind of the something that we're striving for. But you need a lot of collaboration and and I guess to some extent like some open standards so that that you can connect to various systems in an easy way.
Excellent. Any other thoughts or comments on the role of AI and the opportunity there?
I could maybe add to it because then maybe we weren't explicit enough, but for me at least data is a very broad word. So I mean, data can also be a problem because if you have data without any insights or information, then you more have a problem than have solved something. So for me, it goes without saying that those data are used, for example, in AI applications, algorithms. They are used for advanced analytics. They are used for alerts, predictive alerts and all that. So, I mean, data in itself doesn't provide a lot of value, the insights, the information, and what you make out of it. So for me, it's an ecosystem play in itself, where AI is a very natural part of this ecosystem.
Great, thanks for that clarification. Matthew, any comments from your side?
No, I mean, it's depending a lot of companies as well. You have some companies that are really comfortable with getting inside their data and analyze their data themselves because they have the competence and so on. But some other company are just gathering data, are not doing anything with that. And here I see there is a potential for the future, either for consultancy company to come and to help the customer analyzing their data, because for the small to medium company, they will not hire data analytics engineers or people like that. So there will be in need of support from someone else to every 3 months or every 6 months go through the data and try to improve efficiency throughout the results of the analysis. So there is a need here. We are at SECO Consultancy, we are working on this type of middle-sized company, as there is for sure a need for that.
Great, excellent. And there's another question that I would like to, if you can spend 30 seconds each of you providing a perspective, that would be great. But it's about the role of Lean. Lean was often mentioned as part of the foundation, right, to be able to then add digital capabilities. Do you think that changing going forward, are we going to see a different model of Lean? Any perspectives on that?
Yeah, I mean, if I can continue there, I mean, what we can see in Lean is that you will never digitalize something which is not Lean. So if it doesn't work with a pen and paper, don't put a computer on it. It's waste of time. So it's a basic. So you need to be Lean before digitalizing things. And sometimes when people are going too fast on the digitalization, we can see this is a pitfall that people are falling in sometimes.
Right. Anyone, Stefan, Bill, anyone disagrees with that?
Not.
No, not at all. I think it's a nice pattern, huh? Because Lean was very successful. Then there might have been a short tendency to say, now we have new hammers and let's look for the nails and let's put analytics on top of it. And maybe Lean was forgotten a little bit, but then as always, it comes back in the middle. And the understanding that the combination between the good old Lean methodologies and the more advanced data-driven applications, that's the sweet spot. Huh? So never forget the fundamentals, put something fancy and advanced on top of it, and then the result is fantastic.
Excellent, excellent. We are almost on time. So can I ask you in 10 seconds, if you were, we have over 70 people on the line, if you were to give one recommendation to your peers and all the engineers that are following us today, what could that recommendation be?
I would say that this is a great time to invest in your operations, your systems, and leverage data to really improve your manufacturing efficiency. I don't think there's a better time to do that than now.
Stefan.
You have used my words, Bill. Huh? So I would have also, so keep pushing on improving. Let's not be disappointed and frustrated by this current crisis. It's the opportunity to keep pushing and also get funding for improvements after we are through the worst.
Brilliant. Matt.
Yeah, I mean, if you were hesitating about the digitalization journey before the crisis, I think now you know. So it's for sure a way to be more efficient in the future, whatever you start with, in order to be the one that will continue the journey in the future.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. And we are at the end of our time together. So let me thank the three of you for this very insightful and interesting conversation. What I take away is that if this crisis has a positive side, it is probably the fact that it will finally enforce the transition to digital advanced smart manufacturing with all the benefits that will bring. And maybe with that, let me thank the audience as well and hand it over to Graham to close the session.
Wow, I mean, what an amazing hour. Just thank you for all of you across the world to be able to provide these valuable insights, to everybody here. We had, hundreds of people signed up. Well over 70 people in attendance, stayed almost the whole time. Just want to thank you all again for your amazing insights and time. We look forward to continue providing this type of insights as our series continues. So stay tuned, and thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.